In the last video, we saw that I've been able to increase heart rate variability from an average of 47 milliseconds per day in 2018 to an average of 66.6 milliseconds per day thus far in the first half of 2024, which is a 41% increase. Similarly, over that same time span, I've been able to reduce resting heart rate from an average of about 51 beats per minute in 2018 to an average of 42 beats per minute in 2024, first half of 2024, which is an 18% decrease. So in today's video, we'll take a look at which factors may be contributing to these improvements for a relatively higher heart rate variability and a lower resting heart rate over that 6-year plus period. So the most obvious place to start is with physical activity. So to track physical activity rather than looking at steps, which says nothing about the intensity of the effort, in contrast, I've been using the average daily heart rate as a metric of daily physical activity. And Whoop provides that data. I'm not here to promote Whoop. I'm not sure if other fitness wearables provide that metric, but I've been tracking the average daily heart rate, ADHR, and looking at correlations with resting heart rate and heart rate variability. So with that in mind, what's the correlation for the average daily heart rate with the next day resting heart rate? And to address that, we'll take a look at about 1,500 days of data. Unfortunately, I didn't start tracking this until March of 2020. I wish I'd had the idea to start tracking it sooner in 2018. Nonetheless, 1,500 or so days of data. And that's what we'll see here. On the x-axis, we've got the previous day's average daily heart rate plotted against the next day resting heart rate. And then we can see a significant positive correlation with a correlation coefficient of 0.74. Note that by definition, anything greater than 0.7 is considered a strong correlation. In terms of the p-value, we can see that it's far below 0.05 at 4 times 10 to the negative 272nd power. What this suggests is that too much daily activity and too often will be bad for the resting heart rate. All right, what about heart rate variability? So over the same time span, around 1,500 days of data from March of 2020 through the end of June 2024, that's what we'll see here. And now we can see a significant inverse correlation with a correlation coefficient of negative 0.53, not as strong as the correlation for the average daily heart rate with resting heart rate, but significant nonetheless. As you can see, the p-value is 2 times 10 to the negative 115th power, far below 0.05. So here too, this suggests that too much daily activity and too often will be bad for heart rate variability. And taken together, these data suggest that with a higher average daily heart rate, that will lead to chronically worse heart rate variability and resting heart rate. So with that in mind, finding the balance between active and rest days is important for optimizing both resting heart rate and heart rate variability. If I'm just working out every day and not allowing for these metrics to recover, they'll be chronically overtrained. In other words, a lower heart rate variability with a higher resting heart rate. So what does that look like in terms of finding the balance? So for me, and following these data, following resting heart rate and heart rate variability with the goal of getting them towards youthful values, I'm currently on, or I've been on for a few years, 2 90-minute workouts per week. These workouts are full body, essentially circuit training based. I don't take rest sets and rest periods and sit and watch and screw around on the phone. I don't do any of that. It's basically circuit training for those whole 90 minutes, compound movement focused, overhead press, shoulder pull-ups, seated rows, push-ups off a ball, deadlifts, weighted step-ups, and then a whole bunch of mobility, flexibility, taekwondo stuff, a whole bunch of stuff with the goal of optimizing basically every range of motion that each joint can go through. So what does that look like in terms of the average daily heart rate and finding the balance between resting heart rate and heart rate variability for when to train or when to do the next workout? So starting with the active day, this would generally be on a Friday. You can see that my average daily heart rate on that day was 56 beats per minute. And then I purposefully titrate activity lower over the next 2 days. As you can see, it was 54 and then 52 beats per minute. And as a total for the day, that may not seem like a very high average daily heart rate for the day, but note that my average resting heart rate generally ranges from 40 to 42 beats per minute. So on the active day, it's 14 to 16 beats per minute above my resting value. All right, and then after those 2 titrated lower days, generally Saturday and Sunday, I would then do a Monday workout, and you can see that 56 beats per minute for the average daily heart rate is a bump up from the 52. and then generally take 3 recovery days or 3 lower intensity days, which is just basically light walking, nothing too crazy in terms of intensity or effort, as I'm trying to allow enough time for resting heart rate variability to recover, while also allowing for recovery from each workout in terms of, muscle soreness or fatigue. So it's generally a Monday, Friday based workout, but there is some variability depending on how the data look for heart rate variability and resting heart rate. For example, for the past workout on Friday, I cut that to half of the usual 90 minutes because the data was already trending in the overtrained direction. So I didn't want to overdo it. So I cut the workout in half. I try to avoid that as much as possible because cutting these 90 workouts in half over time potentially can lead to a detraining effect, potentially also negatively impacting heart rate variability and resting heart rate. So I try to stick to the 90-minute workout plan as much as possible, but I do allow some time to bend the workouts in terms of intensity and duration based on how the data for heart rate variability and resting heart rate look. All right, but note that physical activity isn't the only variable that may impact resting heart rate and heart rate variability. So with that in mind, what's the relationship for body weight with these cardiovascular fitness metrics? So note that I've weighed myself every morning after using the bathroom, going number 1 and number 2, and fasted, and I have data going back to 2018. So then we can look at correlations for the daily resting heart rate with body weight, and I have now approaching almost 2,200 days of data, which is what we'll see here. On the y-axis, we've got the resting heart rate plotted against body weight. And then we can see a significant positive correlation. Once again, this is a strong correlation as that correlation coefficient is greater than 0.7 at 0.73. And the p-value at 0 seems like an error, but I used 2 different statistical programs to evaluate that. It came up as 0 in Excel, and then I entered the data into statskingdom.com, and using also Pearson product correlations, it came up as 0. So it's essentially the p-value is so low, 10 to the negative maybe 300th power, that it's essentially 0. Highly significant association for body weight with the resting heart rate in my data. So what does that mean? Well, as my body weight has been higher, that's significantly correlated with a higher resting heart rate. And conversely, when my body weight has been at my leanest, around 138 pounds, resting heart rate has approached 40 beats per minute. All right, what about heart rate variability? So over those same about 2,200 days of data, we can see that here. And now we've got a significant inverse correlation, albeit the correlation isn't as strong as the correlation for body weight with resting heart rate, as it's negative 0.46, but it's a significant correlation nonetheless at 2 times 10 to the negative 110th power. And here this suggests that as body weight increases, that's significantly correlated with a lower heart rate variability. And conversely, at my leanest or my lightest, as body weight has approached 138 pounds, heart rate variability has approached relatively youthful values of 70 milliseconds. So to answer the question, what's the relationship for body weight with resting heart rate and heart rate variability, from both of these plots, we can see that they approach youthful values as body weight decreases. All right, that's all for now. If you're interested in more about my attempts to biohack aging, check us out on Patreon, where rather than seeing 3-month updates, this is my first heart rate variability resting heart rate update in about 3 months, I post daily data for resting heart rate variability, the average daily heart rate, and also sleep stages. So if you're interested in that, check it out. We've also got a whole bunch of discount links that you may be interested in, including discount links for epigenetic testing, NAD quantification, oral microbiome composition, at-home metabolomics, at-home blood testing with Softfox Health, which includes ApoB, but also GrimAge, green tea, diet tracking with Chronometer, or if you'd like to support the channel, you can do that with the website Buy Me a Coffee. We've also got merch, so if you're interested in wearing the ConquerAging or Die Trying brand, as I've got on here, that link and all of the other links will be in the video's description. Thanks for watching. I hope that you enjoyed the video. Have a great day.